Do you know the age where it's too old to actually file for disability? Is it like a carton of milk? Best file before age 40? Well, I don't really think it is, but today in this video, we're actually going to talk about what it really means to be filing when you're older versus when you're a younger veteran, because we have a broad landscape of veterans, and I hope this video helps all of you. So I've heard this time and time again. I heard this from my own father. I'm too old to be filing for disability. They won't even take a look at me. So I want to settle this once and for all, and I want to say right up front that age doesn't matter, but maybe not for the reasons that you actually might be thinking. So let's start by dispelling the first myth, which is there is no age cutoff for this. You can actually file for disability at any age, technically. So the VA doesn't say, oh, if you're 67, game over. They actually look at you, and no matter what age, depending on if you're a 19-year-old veteran that got med boarded, or if you're an 80-year-old veteran that's served in 2 different wars and you have a bunch of documentation and you've never filed, you can still file. Every veteran should look into this if they already haven't. Okay, but that being said, age actually does play a role in a few different ways. So let's jump into where. So the first one is review exams after you've been rated, which is better known as the 55 rule, which we'll jump into right after this. The second one is the challenge of proving your service-connected disabilities when it's been decades. So no, you're technically never too old, but when you file, you might just have a different strategy, and you might have to go through a process that could be lengthier depending on what you have supporting documents wise and what you plan to do with that. Okay, so let's jump into the first part that we talked about, which is the 55 rule, and let's talk about what it means and what it does for you as a veteran. All right, so this part gets misunderstood all the time. The VA in their manuals has a general guideline that says at age 55 or older, generally speaking, you will not be reviewed for any more exams. They make the assumption that at that age, whatever conditions you've had probably for a while are not going to get better. You are going to face the inevitable decline of aging. We all hate to think about that, but guess what? It does actually happen to everybody, no matter how old you are, even if you're watching this and you're 24 years old. And the VA does acknowledge that. I guess in some way that's a bonus. But of course, like with everything with the VA, there's nothing that's that clear cut. There are exceptions. So for instance, if you have cancer that goes into remission, or if you have a VA type of disability that's very unusual and uncommon, they could look at a scheduled exam. But for the most part, if you're over the age of 55, or if you're coming up to that age in general, you should not be going back to exams. So I wouldn't sweat it too much, but keep that in the back of your mind that it still can happen. Okay, now the second part, I think this does apply to a lot of people. You're going to be filing later in life if you're older, right? If you're above the age of 55, hell, maybe even if you're just 45, it might have been 20 years since you were in the military, and you've got some service records to provide. At the end of the day, no matter what veteran are, there are still the big 3 things needed for every claim. I actually say that there's 5, and I do teach this in my course, but there are 3 basic informational parts that you need. So let's go over them. So the first one, you need evidence from service of some sort, unless this applies for the PACT Act. The second part to this is that you do need a current diagnosis. And the third part is you need a nexus, not necessarily a nexus letter, but a nexus linking the event from your diagnosis to the time in service. Or if you have the PACT Act, you're linking your time in service in a certain region to your current diagnosis. So with those 3 in mind, if you want to learn everything that you need in the VA process, from gathering evidence, writing your own personal statements, hell, even having free templates, it is 20% off my course if you found me through YouTube. And I would really appreciate if you at least go check out the website. But if you just want to get started real quick, I do have a VA free cheat sheet down below. It's free, so go ahead and sign up for that at least. But I think there's actually a 4th tip. So I'm going to give out a pro tip here to all my older veterans that if you've been out for 20 or 30 years, you're now filing for the first time, you're putting all your paperwork together, showing continuation of your symptoms of your diagnosis is actually going to be super critical as well. So if you have a current diagnosis, that's great, but if you were in the military 30 years ago, how does this current diagnosis have anything to do with the past? And the VA does have a right to look into this. So they could come up and say to you, cool, you've claimed that you have a back injury from 1985, and where's your record of it hurting? Have you gone to the doctor recently? Have you gone to the doctor in the last 20 years? Have you done any sort of treatments? And they're going to ask those questions. So providing information and documentation from a long period of time is going to be in your favor. And I hope that people have done this, because you can't go back in time and get this information. So the best thing that you can do is stay up to date from this point on with whatever you have as a current diagnosis, and try your best to get any information you've had from the past. Now, just like what we talked about before, there's some tried and true pieces of information that are going to be very, very useful in this process. So the first part is having any medical records from service. If you haven't seen the video, I'll link it up here, where you can actually go back to the National Archive and pull every record you have in your name. You can look and find medical documentation there if you've ever been to sick call. And I'm pretty sure and aware that old school back in the day Army dudes especially probably didn't go to sick call, because current ones don't either. So I'm sure it's going to be limited, but if you need to go check that out, check out that video just so you can have an idea of where to find these medical records if you don't have them. But your post-service treatment records are just as important. So maybe you started going to the VA immediately after, or maybe you just went to your private care doctor after the military and you brought up anything. You don't need to just rely on your medical records from service, because a lot of us don't have any. I didn't have as much as I would have liked. I did have enough, but I actually went to the doctor outside of the VA, outside of the military, because I was in the National Guard. I had a track record of going to a normal primary care because I had split insurances. So I had the benefit of that as well. So if you have any post-care or post-treatment, I would also add that. Now, another piece of evidence that's really useful is a buddy letter, but it's not always gonna be the silver bullet that everybody says it is. So the VA's heard a ton of stories from a ton of people, and most of the information that's gonna be given from a buddy might just be very broad strokes, very basic. This is why I teach this in my course. You have specific information and structures that they can look for, because a lot of buddy letters might not really be that compelling. So what's the last thing that can be the most compelling? I would say the last thing is a nexus letter is probably the biggest, most compelling thing that you can get, which is having a doctor say, at least as likely than not, this happened from service and this is what the diagnosis was, and they're linking it together in a statement. They are writing that down as a statement from an MD saying that they think this came from service. They are agreeing that this came from service. Any of those statements from a nexus letter might be the icing on the cake. And look, I'm just gonna be very clear and transparent here. I don't think that everything that comes from pain that you might be experiencing at age 60 is necessarily going to be linked to service. If you're over the age of 40, 50, or 60, then you probably have back pain just from maybe experiencing life. Maybe you weren't taking care of yourself in life, or maybe you were working in a laborious job for years after the military. There's a big spectrum of areas where you could have pain and fatigue and different types of sensitivities because your body is just aging. There is a process of aging. So having documentation over time is going to be the biggest thing on your side. So if you're watching this right now and you're like, well, this doesn't really apply to me because I'm not in the old guy category, but you're 25 years old, it does apply to you. This is one of the videos that you should be watching to think about what it's going to be like in the future when you have to go back and do a CMP exam in case you're not doing it today. And yes, I was there. I am a prime example of that younger person. I was in the infantry, I was rucking a lot, I did a tryout for special forces. You've probably seen in my video that I have this thing. I have a pillow behind my back and I need to get something better for, but in my chair, it hurts to sit every single day when I sit longer than about an hour to an hour and a half. And I'm 33 years old. So if you are 23 years old, you've been rucking, you've joined the infantry, you've found my channel, I hope that you are thinking about the future and your future self, because right now you're feeling good. You're twisted steel and sex appeal. I remember that feeling, and unfortunately it does change over time. To wrap this video up, is it too late? Of course it's not too late. File your claim now. Go through my course if you want to. Go find free information, find a VSO, find a lawyer. File today if you can, because you can at any age as a veteran. We have that benefit. Thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe, give it a share, add a comment, and if you want to watch more, go ahead and watch this video up here.